Hey friends, welcome back to Joyful Homestead. We're Dan and Heidi. So let me ask you this. In the last 7 years of homesteading now, what is the one thing we never run out of?
Oh, the obvious answer is eggs, of course.
Exactly. Oh, that was a little pun I didn't even mean. Seriously,
I didn't get into it either.
So anyway, I have, over the past couple of years, at times gone to the grocery store and find there are no eggs there. So I'm grateful that we've gotten to the point with our flock that we don't have to buy any eggs at the store. I haven't for a long time. So are you at a place where you are growing a flock of chickens yourself, or you have the land without any homeowner restrictions that you can have some? Is that a goal of yours for 2025? And then once you start to get more,
Build your flock.
Exactly. Then you get to the point where you have too many.
It's chicken math, and chicken owners laugh about it. It's a meme. Chicken math is a thing, and you get, I have 12 dozen eggs. What am I going to do with all these?
Exactly. So we need to learn over time what is the best method for us that we have really enjoyed as far as being able to preserve the eggs, and it works well. So Dan is going to explain to you what water glassing is, all the details on how to do it, and how to do some troubleshooting with it. So enjoy this process we're going to show you.
You may have noticed in the past when we've done videos here in our home kitchen studio that there's a carton of eggs sitting on the fridge. We often mean to take that down so it's not distracting to you, but this is actually the way it is every day. When I have a partial carton of eggs that I'm loading up from the coop with fresh eggs, I'll go ahead and put them in here, and then when I get that dozen filled, I'll go ahead and put that back in the closet and then start a new box. It's amazing how many eggs you can get as a homesteader. And if you have 12, 20 chickens, you can imagine how quickly the egg production adds up. We have 14 birds right now, and we've had as many as 25. But there are times when I can't even sell enough eggs or eat enough eggs to be able to keep up with the production of these girls. And we want to show you today a little bit about how you can do even longer term storage for your chicken eggs. It's called water glassing, and you can store eggs up to a year and even a little bit more than a year sometimes. We're going to show you how. So let's first talk about the eggs themselves. Now, the only eggs that qualify for water glassing, unfortunately, are farm fresh eggs with what we call the bloom on them. Now, the bloom is a substance that is secreted on the egg from the hen as the egg passes down through the cloaca into the nesting box. An unwashed egg from a nesting box will have that bloom, we're going to call it the bloom, that substance on it. And that substance is a natural protection for the eggs. If you use store-bought eggs, you're going to find that those eggs have been heavily washed and cleaned. They no longer have that bloom protection on them. So it's really important when we talk about this whole process that you have to either have your own chickens with your own eggs that are producing and not wash them, or you have to acquire those eggs at a farm market or from a friend who has hens that doesn't wash those eggs. Those are the types that we want to water glass. So what is water glassing? Well, water glassing is the introduction of a material, in this case, pickling lime, into the water that an egg sits in. And that pickling lime will clog the pores of the egg so that it is a calcified shell and therefore has no exposure to the outside environment, whether it's the air or the water or anything else. Here are some eggs that we have water glassed. They just turned, believe it or not, 1 year old. So these are ready for us to go ahead and take out of the jar and wash up and then put them in the fridge for our use these next couple of weeks. I will show you how to prepare in this empty jar a new batch of eggs that are going to be water glassed. First, I want to show you how to fill a jar with fresh eggs to be water glassed. So here are the materials you need. You need the jar, of course, the vessel. You need water and your eggs. Fresh eggs are best, laid within the last couple days if possible. And then finally, you need some pickling lime. Now let's talk about each of these separately. First is the jar. I prefer a gallon jar that's made of glass. You can go smaller, you can go bigger, but smaller jars almost are not worth it for the amount of eggs you can fit in, let's say, a mason jar. And then larger jars become a little bit very awkward to work with. So a gallon jar has worked really well with me. And I know from doing this for a couple of years that with a gallon jar, I need 2 quarts of water and about 2 dozen eggs. Now, sometimes I use 26 eggs, sometimes I use 22 eggs, depending on the size of the eggs the chickens laid. It also is important that all the eggs are submerged, and so you can't overfill, obviously. Now, and then at the end, you want to talk about the lime, which has to be pickling lime. And pickling lime is different than other limes because of its strength, okay? A lot of limes are used for different other things like agriculture, but other limes can actually be poisonous, okay? If they're too strong, they can be caustic to your body, especially with things that you're putting in your mouth. You want to make sure to use lime. Of course, all limes are calcium hydroxide, but the pickling lime is a special function that can be used in food-safe stuff. So we're going to go ahead and add all of these together. I'll show you all the measurements right now.
Add 2 quarts of water to a gallon vessel. Then add 1 ounce of pickling lime per quart. An ounce of lime is almost exactly 3 tablespoons. Then stir the liquid with a whisk to mix into a temporary suspension.
So now we're ready to put the eggs in your solution. Before it starts settling, you want to get them in. These are farm fresh eggs, and remember, they're unwashed. You want the bloom on there. Now, some people have asked, so how much debris can be on the eggs when you put them in? For example, can there be straw on them? Can there be mud on them? Can there be a little chicken manure on them? See, there's a little spot right there. And sometimes you can't have a totally pristine egg. But if you're able to just kind of, with your fingernail or maybe with some kind of a scrub sponge without getting too in depth and taking the bloom off, if you can just scratch that off, that's okay. And then you start putting them in very gently. Don't let them go in the water. You want to put them onto the bottom like that, okay? And a lot of these eggs are super clean, but there are a couple that have some stains from when they had some straw or some other stuff on them, okay? You want to definitely be very careful putting these in. It should be about, for this size, 2 dozen eggs. We'll see how many we actually get submerged into this jar. So this is the last egg. We actually ended up with 22. There were 2 that were a little bit too filled with debris, and so I left those out. One thing that's really nice about this jar that I didn't mention before is how large the mouth is. I can stick my hand down in there pretty easily. With a smaller mouth jar, you'll have a lot of problems being able to fit that hand in there. So be mindful of that as well. So we are ready. The water you see is milky. You can see the eggs just barely through that misty water, and that's exactly what you want it to look like. Now it will settle a little bit over time, but right now what this is doing, that suspension is starting to calcify those eggshells and fill the pores. We want to close the jar up, make sure that all of the eggs are completely submerged. Even if you have to go a few eggs short of your goal, you want to make sure every one of them is covered with the water. And then you want to go ahead and put that lid on there. I recommend that after you fill your water glass jar to label the jar with a use by date, month and the year that you want to use the eggs. You'll also want to put the number of eggs in the jar. That way, when it's on the shelf and you see multiple jars, you know which one's the next one to be used. And I also recommend that maybe you start with a 6-month time frame just for comfort. If you're comfortable with 6 months, then you can start being more comfortable 7, 8 months, even up to a year. It's hard to understand that you can actually keep eggs on the shelf for a year, and so getting comfortable with that concept is very important. All right, final thing, we'll set this newly prepared jar to the side and talk about the water glass eggs that have been on the shelf for several months. When you open the lid, you'll be able to visually inspect the eggs. If there's a yellowish color to the water, there may be some eggs in there that aren't good. That doesn't mean all the eggs are bad just because that water has changed color. But as you take the eggs out, you want to visually inspect them. You want to make sure that there aren't any cracks in them. If there aren't any cracks in them, or they don't actually float to the surface of the water, then you can be pretty sure that you have a good and fresh egg still in there. Hey there.
Hey, how's it going?
Good.
You about done?
Yep, just about done. I've washed and I'm drying. They'll go in the fridge here in a minute.
Yay. Did we lose any?
A few.
Okay. That's to be expected. We tend to lose probably about 5% of the ones that we water glass because the shells can be a little bit more fragile than you realize. There might be some weak spots, and when you put them into the jar, you think they're fine, but you get them out months later and one will be cracked because it just wasn't strong enough. And that's okay. You will just set that aside and you won't use it. And look how many we do have. It's such a blessing.
It's crazy. And the eggs themselves now, because they've been washed and dried, and I processed them with the towel and everything, that bloom that we originally had on there is gone. And so these eggs need to be refrigerated. They can be put in the fridge as fresh eggs, just like you would a regular dozen eggs that you would get from the store or whatever.
Right. And speaking of using them, you can use them in any way that you typically would, like baking, cooking, and scrambling. The only thing you cannot do is hard boil them, because since you've fortified that shell so much, it has no porous way of letting air out, and so if you boiled it, it would literally explode in your pot. So don't try it.
They burst from all that pressure inside them when you boil, for sure. And then the last thing that we want to explain is that when you use a water glassed egg in a recipe or your scramble or whatever, when you crack that egg, there's going to be a physical difference between that and a regular egg. The yolks are runnier, and they don't stand up as much. That does not mean that it's a bad egg or that it's inferior in any way. The quality is the same, the taste is the same. It just has that little bit of a difference because it's been in that lime suspension for months.
Yeah, and you'll get used to that. So I hope that has helped you learn how to do this way. We're excited for you to try it. If there are some other ways that you already preserve eggs that you really love, share them down in the comments below. We love to hear about experiences that others have. Have a great day.